In the Isle of Lewis in Scotland, Kirsty is taught by her father how to swim. He also tells them about the freedom they could possibly find in America, and Kirsty dreams of going there someday. Years pass, and the father dies of cancer. Kirsty lives with her sister Annie and her mother Myri, and together they take care of the farm. To carry his dad's memory with her, Kirsty always wears his cross necklace. One afternoon, the sisters are invited to the road dance, a gathering the village often organizes to have some fun at the end of the day. Myri allows them to go, and on their way there, the sisters are warned by old Peggy to be careful when it comes to boys, who are taking more and more interest in them now that they've become ladies. At the party, the boys are teasing Murdo, who is serving the country as a messenger between units in Glasgow. Murdo has a deep love for books and prefers them rather than socializing, which is why the others like to make fun of him. When Murdo finally gets his tormentors off his back, he finds a quiet place where he can read in peace, and Kirsty follows him to spend some time with him. It turns out they're having an affair that they're keeping secret because they aren't married yet, but Murdo promises he'll give Kirsty the life in America she's always wanted someday. Their little meeting is cut short when they see old Skipper hanging around, so they decide to leave not to be found. The next Sunday after attending Mass, Kirsty takes Murdo to the beach where her father used to take her swimming and learns that Murdo's own father never made it back after a fishing accident. Murdo never learned how to swim, thus Kirsty promises to teach him one day. That afternoon, the lovebirds have their first kiss. The next day, Myri scolds her daughter for coming home late, to which Kirsty replies with a lie about losing track while reading. Annie finds it suspicious, but before she can say anything, Myri sends Kirsty to deliver eggs to Skipper, who Kirsty thinks is a weirdo. In the evening, Annie guesses Kirsty had something great happen to her, and after she swears she won't tell their mother, Kirsty decides to share with her little sister what kissing a boy feels like. Sometime later, the villager receives an official announcement calling for all the young men to join the army, which is obligatory. Afterward, Murdo meets Kirsty at the beach so she can finally teach him to swim, using the same technique her father taught her. Once their little date is over, Murdo finally tells Kirsty he's been called to fight in the front lines, which breaks Kirsty's heart. To try to cheer her up at least a little, Murdo promises he'll come back when the war is over and he'll marry Kirsty to then take her to America. In the evening, the village throws another road dance to say goodbye to the guys. Kirsty wears a beautiful dress Myri gifts her and used to wear when she was courting her father. Then Murdo comes to pick Kirsty up, bringing flowers with him, which makes their relationship public. At the gathering, everyone has lots of fun dancing, chatting, and drinking a lot. By the time night falls, most people are drunk, and a boy that likes Kirsty gets jealous of Murdo, causing him to harass her for a while and punch Murdo when he tries to defend her. Fortunately, he's just fine, so when Kirsty needs to relieve herself, she doesn't hesitate to leave him alone for a few minutes while she goes to the hills. While she's doing her thing, a mysterious man surprises her from behind and hits her head on the rocks before taking advantage of her. Kirsty is bleeding, and because her face is pushed against the ground, she doesn't get to see who the man is before she passes out. A few hours pass, and when Kirsty doesn't come back, Murdo goes looking for her and finds her on the hills, so he wakes her up as soon as he notices the blood, but Kirsty only tells him that she fell. Murdo immediately takes her to see Dr. McLean, who takes her in and gives her some medicine plus stitches for her wound while Murdo runs to tell her family. McLean notices Kirsty has pain in her lower regions, but when she insists that she fell and doesn't remember anything else, McLean lets her rest for the night. The next morning, Murdo takes Kirsty to her family so she can be taken care of, and when Kirsty is finally alone in her room, she checks her underwear, breaking into tears when she sees the blood that confirms what happened last night. Desperate not to be found out, she throws her pad into the fire. Later, Kirsty joins the rest of the village to say goodbye to the boys. Murdo reminds his brother to take good care of their mom before giving Kirsty a book with his favorite quotes. He also gives her enough money to take a ship to America in case he doesn't make it back. In return, Kirsty gives him her father's necklace, but she refuses to kiss him because she still feels dirty. After all the boys leave with a blessing from the priest, Kirsty goes back to the hills where everything happened and privately has a full breakdown, unaware that Skipper is watching from afar. That night, Kirsty has nightmares of the attack, and Myri has to wake her up to stop all the screaming. The next morning, Constable McCrae comes to check on Kirsty because Peggy had been worried about her, but once again Kirsty promises it had been just a fall and nothing else. Weeks begin to pass, and Kirsty keeps track of her monthlies, or lack of, in a notebook until eventually she has to face the truth: she's pregnant. She doesn't tell anybody though because she still doesn't want to bring shame to the family and miss her chance to marry Murdo, who writes to her as often as he can. His letters are the only comfort Kirsty has nowadays. One morning, she brings another delivery to Skipper, who in return gives her some flowers for her and her mother. Kirsty finds the gesture very sweet and notices Skipper has a picture of America, prompting him to share some stories of his travels. This makes Kirsty admit she's been misjudging Skipper all along. As the baby grows, Kirsty begins having the usual pregnancy troubles, like wanting to throw up at random times. One time this happens when she's in town, and Peggy begins getting suspicious. When it happens at home, Myri and Annie worry about her, but Kirsty just blames it on a stomach bug and brushes them off rather coldly. When her belly begins to grow, Kirsty hides it by wrapping some cloth around her abdomen and wearing baggy clothes, which is rather painful and makes her extra hot. Kirsty also begins sleeping more and waking up in awful moods, which gets her scolded by her mother often. One evening, Myri invites Dr. McLean for dinner to thank him for taking good care of Kirsty, and they get to hear the story of his failed marriage. The doctor's wife left him after he went bankrupt for offering his services to the poor. Some days later, Kirsty overhears the mailman saying the army is starting to think they'll need to get the women's help too. He also brings a telegram for the neighbors saying their son died in battle. Desperate to help her country so the same doesn't happen to Murdo, Kirsty drags Annie with her to ask Peggy to start a group of knitters, since the army takes donations of all kinds of garments. Peggy is happy to teach all the girls in town, but she can't help wondering why Kirsty keeps wearing such a thick, big coat. To avoid answering the question, Kirsty says she isn't feeling well and flees to the hills, where she takes off the binding cloth to get some relief from the pain and takes the chance to read Murdo's latest letter. Her reading is suddenly interrupted by Annie, who expresses worry for her sister after finding the binding cloth on the ground. Since Annie won't stop begging for an explanation for Kirsty's weird moods, Kirsty makes her promise she won't tell anyone and finally confesses she's pregnant. Annie stays supportive and assumes Murdo is the father, but Kirsty doesn't correct her. Some days later, one of the boys returns to the village because he lost an arm and couldn't be a soldier anymore. He also brings bad news: Murdo has disappeared. In the middle of a battle, he went against enemy fire to save 2 of his friends, but he never came back. Kirsty thinks he could still be alive, but then she's given the cross necklace the boys found on the ground, which destroys any hope she had, causing her to break into tears. Later at home, Myri is comforting Kirsty while she cries and notices her big belly, finally learning the truth. She also believes the father is Murdo, and when she discusses the matter with Annie, she agrees she won't tell anyone in the village either. The next morning, Myri tells Kirsty that she knows about the baby and considers the option of leaving the village with her daughters. When she brings up Murdo, Kirsty quickly corrects her and tells her about the attack, apologizing in tears. This doesn't change Myri's mind. She stays supportive of her daughter and tells her she did nothing wrong. Kirsty also explains Dr. McLean knows she was attacked but not about the pregnancy, so maybe they should go to him, but Myri refuses because then the whole village will know and they'll treat her badly. Their argument is suddenly interrupted when Kirsty's water breaks 2 months before even approaching the right date. To make matters worse, at that moment the local priest comes to the house to offer some prayers for Murdo's death, but Myri quickly sends him away saying Kirsty is sleeping and needs to rest after hearing the bad news. Afterward, Myri and Annie help Kirsty give birth right there on the bedroom floor, which is a very painful experience for Kirsty, but by the end of it she's eager to hold her child. At first Myri doesn't want to hand the boy to her because she doesn't want Kirsty to get too attached. The plan is to send the baby away so he can have a good life away from judging villagers, but Kirsty continues to cry and beg, thus Myri gives in and allows her to hold the baby for just a moment before taking him away from the night. Kirsty wants to keep the boy, but Myri reminds her that for now she needs to rest and they can discuss things in the morning. After Kirsty falls asleep, Myri takes care of the baby, but he won't drink milk and he looks extremely pale, most likely because he was born early. Annie doesn't want the baby to go, and Myri explains she would love to keep him too, but the boy deserves to have a good life if he survives the night at all. Kirsty, who had only been pretending to be asleep, overhears all this and waits for her family to fall asleep to take the baby and leave the house in the middle of the night, intending to take him to the doctor. Unfortunately, Myri had been right and the baby dies while Kirsty is still crossing the hills. When Kirsty notices, she apologizes in tears and puts her necklace inside the baby's clothes before deciding to end things because she feels guilty for the baby's death. At that moment, Annie and Myri arrive, but it's too late. The baby is taken away by the waves and Kirsty almost drowns. As she begins remembering her father's swimming lessons, Annie appears in the water and helps her sister out. In the morning, Skipper finds the baby on the shore and tells McCrae, who immediately goes to see the doctor to ask him if he knew of any pregnant women in the village. McLean responds he doesn't, and when McCrae remembers the weird circumstances around Kirsty's supposed fall months ago, McCrae sticks to his story. Still unconvinced, McCrae takes the doctor to Myri's home and makes him check on Kirsty to be sure she hadn't been birthed. Luckily the constable stays outside the room, so McLean tells the family he's on their side and does the corresponding checkup while whispering to Kirsty that she can trust him. This makes Kirsty uncomfortable, but she isn't sure why. Once the checkup is done, the doctor lies to McCrae and tells him Kirsty is still pure. McCrae leaves the family alone for now, but he's still suspicious of how weird everyone was behaving in that house, so he promises to get a second opinion. All this is overheard by Peggy from behind her window. The next Sunday during Mass, McLean secretly informs Myrie of the doctor from the city that will be coming later to check on Kirsty again. By the time McCrae shows up with the new medic, Myrie is ready. Since once again the constable will be waiting outside, Annie pretends to be Kirsty, and the doctor reports to McCrae that everything is fine here. McCrae is furious over the lack of proof, so McLean tells him to get over it. The baby was probably stillborn and the water must have brought him from another village. This is also overheard by Peggy. All this time, Kirsty can't sleep well because she feels responsible for the baby's death, no matter how many times Annie reminds her that it hadn't been her fault. The flashbacks of the attack also keep appearing in her nightmares, and one morning, she has a realization that makes her finally leave her home. She goes to see Dr. McLean and accuses him of being her attacker. At first he plays dumb, but he can't deny it anymore when Kirsty explains that when he whispered to her at home, she recognized the smell of the whiskey in his breath, which matched the attacker's. Kirsty calls him a sick man and swears to never forgive him, leaving it in the hands of God to judge. At that moment, Constable McCrae shows up and Kirsty leaves in a hurry, ignoring the doctor's pleas to hear him out. McCrae finds this very suspicious and rushes inside the doctor's house when he hears a gunshot while Kirsty goes home in tears, getting the attention of everyone in the village including Peggy and Skipper. Once she gets home, Kirsty tells her family that the doctor did it, but before they can discuss things further, McCrae bursts in and announces McLean is dead. He used his own gun to end things. He wants to accuse Kirsty of many crimes and calls her out for her forbidden affairs with men, but Myrie immediately comes in her defense, explaining McLean attacked her and that a secret dark past would explain why a supposedly great doctor suddenly came to this village in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly Peggy shows up as well and sends McCrae away with fury, pointing out McLean had a choice but Kirsty hadn't. Knowing he can't go against the village's elder, McCrae drops the subject and leaves the family to comfort each other. A year later, Kirsty finally feels well enough to leave for America with the ship money Murdo had left her. The whole village comes to say goodbye to her, and Skipper takes the chance to give her back her necklace, which he rescued from the baby before he was buried. Weeks later, Kirsty is living in New York at peace when suddenly someone knocks at the door. To her shock, it's Murdo himself. It turns out the Germans had found him and kept him as a prisoner until the war ended, and when he returned home, Myrie told him everything that happened. Murdo apologizes for not having been there for Kirsty, but he's ready for them to start a new life now, and the couple finally gets to kiss again.